You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
Some of the first drug war stuff was actually tobacco back in Europe. There were certain kings that were like, that is disgusting, ugly habit, don't do it. Didn't work out very well. And then there was, drug wars happening from kind of Catholic missionaries where they were kind of like, erase plant medicine traditions and different religious traditions that looked stable enough to make resistance possible to Catholicism in the empire. So like there's like kind of this tie-in with the empire and drug war. And then if we look at early America drug war history, we're looking at like opium and cannabis. And so we're othering, like the rhetoric was around black jazz musicians and then Asian immigrants, and Asian folks were, brought over to help build railroads, and sometimes they would smoke opium. And so it was used to make them a lower class of human, drug war rhetoric. And similarly, during our Vietnam War, it was used to other the Black Panther Party and like black rights people, and also the hippie anti-war movement. So you can't make people illegal, but you can make things that people do illegal. And this is pretty well documented with tapes from Richard Nixon himself and pretty well documented by some of his top aides retroactively. Like, we're not doing a science-based thing. If there was to be a drug policy, it should be driven by science, not opinion. We're very far away from a science-based drug policy because cannabis is quite safer than alcohol and tobacco, psilocybin and LSD and ayahuasca. I think, generally speaking, ayahuasca is much safer than alcohol. There's a lot of things out there that are safer than what's legal, globally speaking. Colombia has been a leader in the drug war. Colombia has been a major target of the drug war. Like, I remember how much military action was happening from United States military in Colombia, not necessarily exclusively through the Escobar period, but after too.
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with the host Sam Believ. Today I'm interviewing Joe Moore. Joe is the co-founder and CEO of Psychedelics Today, one of the leading platforms for psychedelic education and media. With a background in philosophy, breathwork facilitation, and software, Joe has been a key voice in psychedelic movement since 2016. He co-hosts Psychedelics Today podcast, runs professional training programs, and advocates for responsible psychedelic use, integration, and policy reform. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, as I was telling you that I'm very familiar with your voice because whenever I'm planning to interview someone, I always try to listen to a couple episodes, and there's always they always are on your show as well. So I heard a lot of you and Kyle, so it's interesting to talk to you in person. So, Joe, tell us your story. How did you end up in this line of work? Promoting, conscious use of psychedelics and mental health.
I accidentally bumped into a book called Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot in my Philosophy 101 course. It was assigned reading, and there was a section in there about Stan Grof's LSD psychotherapy in Soviet Prague at the time. And it's fascinating because he had a whole inpatient facility dedicated to psychedelic use for therapy. It didn't seem real to me. It seemed like something like, I really have to call bullshit on this, or I have to go read. So I was like, I want it to be real, and I want psychedelics to be real and helpful because this is a really interesting story. Turns out my small school that I was going to had a bunch of books by Stan, and I started reading about LSD psychotherapy at that point, and then found some teachers in the next state over in the US and found holotropic breathwork and really committed to that as a practice for about 6 years. And at the same time, I'm like trying to find psychedelics, not being very successful. Probably wasn't asking the right people. And then I started actually to get more serious. I was like, I really need to find psychedelics. I've read kind of 100 books, listened to 100 podcasts on this thing so far. Like, how can I not have the experience? Started growing, didn't work for me. Started actually going to and attending Burning Man meetups in Boston. and like tried my best to get access that way. And so I was doing kind of community meetups in Boston, trying to get people together to talk about psychedelics. And that was an interesting gateway, because from what I learned on how to operate groups in holotropic breathwork, I could operate groups on psychedelics. It was very similar framework and style of conversation to help people feel comfortable enough to share and get something out of the sharing and being in group. So had my initiatory ayahuasca experience about 2009, maybe. That was my first psychedelic experience without drugs. And that kind of played really an important role in my life, kind of got depression out of there. And felt like I was walking on sunshine for at least 6 months from one dose. And then moved to Colorado, kind of tried to do the same thing in Boulder and Denver. Eventually realized I just wanted to be in the mountains. So I moved out to the mountains, and Kyle and I started our podcast in 2016. We probably started chatting in 2014. He was trying to talk me into going to grad school for psychedelics, and I was trying to talk him out of it. And neither of us were successful, but we decided we wanted to have a podcast, and that's how I got here. Started really using a lot of psychedelics heavily in about 2014. So, there's a lot of personal experience that goes along with it.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, it's a long time ago, kind of the very early beginnings of the psychedelic renaissance. So you've done, I've asked ChatGPT, and it says you've done psychedelic podcast has 736 interviews. Is that accurate?
I say over 700. That probably sounds better. That sounds like a better number.
And do you reckon you've been at least in like what? I think you do more interviews than Kyle, so maybe like 60%, 70?
Maybe even 80 at this point. Because he spends a lot of time running our educational programs. So I try to run the media, and he stays being the teacher.
That's like 650 interviews or whatever. That's like a lot of conversations. Do you ever find yourself like just tired, not wanting to talk to anyone again?
Certain guests for sure. Sometimes I want to hide, which actually, stuff happened. Like it was during when Denver was legalizing and decriminalizing a lot of psychedelics and mushrooms. I just decided I didn't like what was happening in the community, and I needed to just be a hermit in the mountains for a few years. And so I just did internet stuff like this and chose not to So in a sense, yes, I definitely chose to like opt out of the community for a while, because I didn't like what was going on.
What was happening that you didn't like?
Bad behavior, stuff that felt risky in terms of the way people were treating each other, just really sharp opinions. I didn't feel like there was a lot of grounded conversation happening. So, like I come from this perspective of harm reduction and, safe supply. And, one of the major problems in our ecosystem is that the government makes it such that we can't operate safely while also, safely chemically and or legally, right? Like we might be incarcerated, we might die from consuming something that, we don't know if it's safe or not because they don't allow us to tell if it's safe or not. We're going to do it anyway. Like that's the history of this thing. Like, we're very far into the war on drugs. And still today, people say it's over. It's absolutely not over. And people are still dying, and it's the government's choice to kill us. So I come from that perspective, and psychedelics being a major component of the drug ecosystem, people, I would see very kind of complicated dialogues that didn't make sense to me. And then people would fight each other like crazy. And sometimes it looked like people were going to put each other at legal risk. And I'm just not okay with that kind of thing. And I was like, I'm going to go play my own game and not be at legal risk being near these folks. And, not to mention like the moral arguments, like you're a bad person if you have this opinion. I'm like, I'm of the opinion that you're a bad person if you want my friends to die from using drugs, and or go to jail. That's kind of where I live, which is a very different conversation from a lot of parts of the drug and psychedelic ecosystems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, smart decision. You pick your fights. You don't want to be in this one. You just withdraw. That's very, very strategic. And yeah, regarding sharp opinions, like it was my first time at Maps, and we had a booth there, and apart from this podcast, I run a retreat. It's called Lawara, and we're like one of the most affordable retreats out there, and one of the best reputable retreats. So we really know what we're doing, and we're doing it well. But we would get like people come and say like, like very charged, like, oh, like what about your indigenous shaman? Like kind of convinced that we're mistreating them, even though like my shaman is probably the richest guy in his town, and like he has a pretty good life and works like 4 days a week. But they just wanted to fight. There are people with like strong opinions. Not all, not most. Like it was a minority, but like U.S. definitely. Even though it's psychedelic space and everyone's sort of on the same page, but there's a lot of infighting and a lot of tension. That's how it felt to me. It felt very foreign, given that I'm in my little micro bubble here, also in the mountains of Colombia, but there's basically no negativity here. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that, and then talk about war on drugs.
Yeah, so it's a whole complicated thing about like how I have light opinions on like, what kind of energy exchange is appropriate for shamanism. So like I'll put it a different way. What kind of energy exchange is acceptable for medicine? What kind of energy exchange is acceptable for magic, right? Like cuz we're kind of in this intersection of all three things. And like I don't think anybody has a reasonable answer for that. I think like if it's some pretty white girl from Washington, D.C. doing it, that's a very different conversation versus somebody who's like, steeped in the tradition, and I think access is important. My primary critique of Amazonian shamanism and like the commercialization aspect is just, how many times a year should people be flying to the jungle to go consume? And I'm thinking of Americans particularly, or Europeans. Like I don't know, like how many times do I need to fly intercontinentally to do my religion and do my healing? And I think we should be highlighting really great operators and really great shamans, and especially if they're ethical and amazing, but like how do we balance climate change in the mix? But people in the jungle need work too, and they have amazing skills. And so like, let them heal, let healers heal is kind of my position. There's conservation angles, but like ayahuasca doesn't like worry me from a conservation point of view, from like, are people going to have enough ayahuasca? Like I think other things like peyote are more concerning to me, and Sonoran desert toad, but like I'm not too concerned about the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, ayahuasca grows where nothing else grows. And to grow ayahuasca, you need to grow a tree first. So it's kind of like reforestation effort. And then, yeah, you need like 2 years to get a vine to be relatively mature to harvest it.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah, you just need some time.
So my primary like hope, like I hope somebody does this, is some sort of cooperative agriculture venture with some indigenous groups to just reforest tons of land and do kind of like regenerative agroecology, agroforestry, and like try to figure out how do we create really healthy jungle ecosystems that everything likes, including the earth and the land, right? And then also have this kind of thing that helps people, which would be in this case ayahuasca.
Well, maybe somebody is listening and they will be inspired. So go do this work. Sounds very complicated. So you mentioned war on drugs. You said they don't. Government doesn't want you to be alive, or I mean, not like killing you specifically, but they don't want people that take psychedelics to be alive. Why do you think so? Like, what is? I mean, I have my theory. What?
I have to be more nuanced than that. So I want to interject that one of my best childhood friends I don't think he was related, but he was Colombian. He's from Bogota. His last name was Escobar. So I've had a long love affair with Colombia, even though I've never been. But anyway, so like how I want to put it is like the government likes to use the drug war to other people, to like act other as like an active term. Like I turn you into something other than me so that I can do something to you. And so think about like I'm so steeped in America that I assume everybody knows American history, but it's not true, right? So like some of the first drug war stuff was actually tobacco back in Europe. There were certain kings that were like, that is a disgusting, ugly habit. Don't do it. Didn't work out very well. Tobacco won in Europe. And then there was, drug wars happening from kind of Catholic missionaries where they were kind of like, erase plant medicine traditions and different religious traditions that looked stable enough to, make resistance possible to Catholicism in the empire. So like there's like kind of this tie-in with the empire and drug war. And then if we look at early America drug war history, we're looking at like opium and cannabis. And so we're othering like the rhetoric was around Black jazz musicians and then Asian immigrants, and Asian folks were, brought over to help build railroads, and sometimes they would smoke opium so it was used to make them a lower class of human, drug war rhetoric. And similarly, during our Vietnam War, it was used to other the Black Panther Party and like Black rights people, and also the hippie anti-war movement. So you can't make people illegal, but you can make things that people do illegal. And this is pretty well documented with tapes from Richard Nixon himself, and pretty well documented by some of his top aides retroactively. So the idea is that we're still not cleaning up, like we're not doing a science-based thing. Like if there was to be a drug policy, it should be driven by science, not opinion. And we're very far away from a science-based drug policy because cannabis is quite safer than alcohol and tobacco. Psilocybin and LSD and ayahuasca, I think generally speaking, ayahuasca is much safer than alcohol. You don't want to overuse it, but like there's a lot of things out there that are safer than what's legal globally speaking. Colombia has been a leader in the drug war. Colombia has been a major target of the drug war. Like I remember how much military action was happening from United States military in Colombia, not necessarily exclusively through the Escobar period, but after too. Like exfoliation of the rainforest to like out factories and like extraction plants. It's like, it's not okay that we're kind of like exporting our opinion-based violence globally, and we're still doing it, So there is not a good, safe container in America for us to be safe operators around drugs. And a lot of us in America have lost a lot of friends to contaminated drug supply, starting with not knowing how strong something is, not knowing if it's adulterated with other materials, like a fentanyl, for instance, and people dying, So when people, before prohibition, like before 1920s America, people could buy almost whatever they wanted, morphine, cocaine, heroin, and they knew what they were buying and in what quantities and what potencies, and they could go to the doctor like they had a normal disease. They can't really do that these days. They're treated as second-tier citizens or third-tier citizens in America. If you have addiction, often, like if you're trying to go for stuff like Suboxone treatment, for instance. So sorry for the super dialed in rampage there, but I just kind of wanted to get some data out.
No, man. I mean, first of all, I largely agree. It's definitely not the approach, and the U.S. has been losing war on drugs since forever. It's only getting worse. And now there's fentanyl, right? That makes everything so dangerous. So as long as it's not adulterated, it's like, so it's so scary. That interesting fact you mentioned Colombia, and one of my sort of dreams. So I'm not Colombian. I've been here for 8 years, and my wife is Colombian, and I look more Colombian than I do Latvian. That's where I'm from originally. So people assume I'm Colombian, but I care deeply for this country. I think it's an amazing country. I have 3 Colombian children now. So I want it to have a bright future. And one of my sort of dreams is to rebrand Colombia from cocaine to ayahuasca. And interestingly enough, I've been talking about it since I started working with the medicine. But my shaman told me a few years ago that now it's actually more profitable in the jungle to grow ayahuasca than to grow coca, because it grows in the same jungle. Literally, you have like jungle, and in between the trees, you grow coca or you grow ayahuasca. And we speculate that the reason for that is fentanyl taking all of the more addicted people, and they just switch to fentanyl because it's cheaper and whatever. And then the other thing is people that consume cocaine recreationally are now afraid to do it because they think it has some fentanyl and they will die. So basically, cocaine has dropped in popularity because of fentanyl. And now ayahuasca is more profitable, which is kind of a good sign. And like in a weird way, coca, there's nothing wrong with coca. Like you have some mambe, and mambe is lovely. You take a spoon, takes away hunger. It's a superfood. It's not addictive. You can be in high altitudes and feel okay. It's what we do with those plants. It's like, so there's good drugs, bad drugs, and mostly it's in our hands. But yeah. So where was I going with this? Anyways.
If you want to disagree with me about drug war, go for it. I would love the conversation. But I think you're right. Like coca is not bad. I think from what I understand, like agriculture of coca just hasn't, like agriculture as like the peasant farmer has never been very profitable. Like the profit comes downstream, right? From like the manufacturer to distribution end, because coca is not really that hard to grow either. But I think you're onto something. And the global demand for ayahuasca is much higher now. Much higher.
And also on the other point that you were saying about people, flying and the ecology, which is another can of worms, but we're not going to stop people from flying, and I hope they don't stop because it's going to ruin my business. And I'm obviously against psychedelic tourism ending. But for each one person that flies to Colombia to drink ayahuasca, there's 1,000 people coming here to take cocaine and have sex for money, which is very unfortunate. So in a way, it's just about not maybe increasing the amount of people flying here, but just converting them. And a lot of them seek those things because they are in pain emotionally, and they just use it as an escape instead of just, drinking some ayahuasca and then doing some good integration and healing. But let's switch topics. So you have, you're part of two companies, which is the podcast, the Psychedelics Today show, and the Vital training. So obviously you chose to educate people in this space. So why is education important in the psychedelic space?
We initially started our education arm of the company because we wanted college kids to have an easier time. Like people can have a very difficult time with psychedelics. Like I think everybody's, if you had a handful of experiences, you can probably understand what that means, right? Like going back to your job, like how soon do you divorce? Like all that kind of stuff. Like how it's really challenging. And like, how do you go back to your job? Like a lot of these things can be really difficult with psychedelic experiences, including ayahuasca. And I wanted people to understand a little bit about preparation and at least a little bit about integration. And honestly, frankly, like a little bit about safety. There's a lot of safety issues out there. And, drug supply is one of them. But, who is safe to do psychedelics with is another one, or who's safe to even tell that you're doing it, where is safe to do it, things like that. So we wanted people to have a better experience. And the reason behind that is the less bad news there is around psychedelics and drugs more generally, the harder time media is going to have demonizing these things. And I'm a true believer that psychedelics can really be helpful for folks. And I just, want more people to have access, and having less kind of negative media attention drives less policing and drives safer access and better outcomes overall. It's a better set and setting. So it's like a kind of an ecosystem play. Like, how do we make a much healthier ecosystem so more and more people can flourish? And that was kind of the idea.
This episode is sponsored by La Guaira Ayahuasca Retreat. Most of you know La Guaira if you've been listening to this podcast for a while. Some of you might have already been to La Guaira before. For those who don't know us yet, we started La Guaira with my wife 4 years ago. At La Guaira, we combine authenticity, accessibility, and affordability. La Guaira is currently highest rated ayahuasca retreat in South America with more than 630 5-star reviews and an average rating of 5 stars. If you come to La Guaira, you'll experience powerful, authentic ceremonies led by our indigenous shaman, Fernando, in a very beautiful venue just 1 hour south of Medellin, Colombia. We're surrounded by nature and have comforts like hot water, Wi-Fi. At La Guaira, our team has guided more than 2,000 people through this life-changing transformation of ayahuasca experience. At the same time, we keep it very affordable. At the moment, we have retreats starting at as low as $645. So whether you're coming for healing, clarity, or a deeper connection to yourself, La Guaira is the best choice. If it is your first time drinking ayahuasca, you will love our 3.5-hour preparation course and integration support. All of that is included in price, as well as pickup from Medellin, accommodation, and ayahuasca. There are no hidden fees. Visit laguaira.com to book your retreat or learn more. La Guaira, connect, heal, grow. LAWAYRA.com. How's it going? What are the main challenges? Like you're training, you're helping people learn. I think you don't call it facilitation, but what's the exact phrasing you use? You train integration coaches?
So for a lot of reasons, we're not all that specific. So we'll train anybody from anesthesiologists to wellness professionals like massage therapists, physical therapists, yoga teachers, like all sorts of people. Like, we're a very inclusive program. And one of the terms is psychedelic informed practice. So whatever that means. So imagine you run an ayahuasca facility somewhere and you need somebody to answer the phone that isn't you. Like, do you want your mother-in-law who's not trained, or do you want like somebody who's really well trained in psychedelics to answer the phone and or do the marketing, do the accounting, do the be in the room with people, not necessarily doing the work, but even being in the room? A certain level of education is really helpful before having customers interact with those persons or like prospects. So like, we call it psychedelic informed practice. People that come out, for sure, some are facilitating. We're not saying you're legally allowed to facilitate. You can go do whatever you want. I'm not here to tell people what they can and cannot do. I'm here to build a community of people that holds each other accountable to standards. And hopefully, if there's somebody that needs attention, they can work it out themselves, because there's no way to police this thing while it's still underground. So community to me is the solution. And that's why we've done what we've done. I think we've done a good job with Vital. We've had, I think, over 500 people through the program now. And I'm so proud of what they've done. So anything from integration to facilitation to designing all sorts of interesting small companies. At the conference at MAPS PS25, we had a lot of people from our program with their own booths. I think there was like 5 or 6 companies that we knew about that were Vital graduates with their own companies. And it's not all facilitation. I actually don't know that more than one was facilitation. So like, it's a broad spectrum of things. And a turn of phrase I use is holotropic breathwork, like the Stan Grof breathwork method. Bare minimum, 2 years. It's probably going to take somebody 4 years to finish the program. And there's no drugs involved. And like, we have drugs involved. Like, we have really powerful things going on. I wouldn't be comfortable saying you're good to go and facilitate after a year, as part of a program. Like, certain individuals, maybe, like certain individuals coming into Vital are probably amazing facilitators before they even start. But like, I just want people to know that this is a lifelong journey and path of education. and that vital can be a major foundational step one for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would probably never step into this line of work and like be a part of that, ceremonial setting if I didn't have like a shaman who has been doing it for his entire life and be like, okay, I can do it alone, but if you're there, it's nice, so it's like you don't carry the brunt of the responsibility physically and also spiritually. And yeah, it's really cool that you say people that go through your training program, they create a lot of new businesses and new ideas, because obviously your creativity is also quite enhanced by this line of work. And I've actually met 3 people at MAPS that were our, we call our people that come to our doors patients, because we see it as like ancestral healing. And 2 of them actually pursued career in, psychology. So they want to do psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, and it was inspired by their experience. So it's always nice to see you affect people positively. And so speaking about success stories, from your point of view, like out of those 500 people, and like when they get the training, what is like, what do you want to see where, and for you it's like, it was success, what attributes or characteristics or knowledge you want them to exhibit?
Humility and respect for people's own process. I really want to see people doing their own work and understanding that to do well here, they also need to be doing work on themselves. I want people to understand that they should and kind of necessarily need to be in community with each other around this. And, if you're in isolation, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you don't have people kind of calling you to account if you do make mistakes. I personally really want to see people that are somewhat model agnostic, meaning, how to put it? I want people to be able to function in kind of like the neuroscience, contemporary science kind of therapy worldview, but also flip into other worldviews and allow for their clients, patients, whoever they're working with, to have their own worldview that isn't necessarily in agreement. Substance agnosticism is something I would like to see. I'd like to see model agnosticism from them to some degree. Like, everybody's going to pick up their own framework eventually, but I think, those are some of the kind of fundamental pillars. And I'd like to see people kind of understand that the drug war is a drug on us, not necessarily like a war on drugs. It's really, it's not about stamping out drugs. It's a way of controlling people, and harming. Yeah.
So you said everyone's gonna find their favorite modality or their favorite medicine or psychedelic. What's your favorite psychedelic?
Oh God. It's like picking your favorite kid,
We all know we shouldn't, but we all know we have a favorite kid.
I've been saying that lately. Which one's your favorite? I love that. So I think, like, there's a rank, right? I really love LSD. I really like mushrooms a lot. I really like 2CB, which is kind of not 2C like you have in Colombia. 2CB, it's like a derivative of mescaline in a way. And so what else? Those are kind of like the tops right now. Of course, I like DMT. I like, probably if I was to like pick a team in the way some people pick like soccer, football teams, like I would be like LSD. If I had to pick a team, I would be team LSD right now. Bang for your buck for like less than $10, 12 hours. That's tough to beat. And the risk profile being super low. I put out an Instagram story yesterday about this. Like, Terrence McKenna kind of had this dream about dematerialization, and maybe etherealization is kind of what he called it. Like, imagine if we could just own a lot less things and humanity require a lot less physical tools, so that we have less of a footprint on Earth. LSD fits that. Like, micrograms is the dose, right? 1/4 milligram. And like, if we want to be kind of like futuristic and like that kind of thinking, LSD kind of really does it for me. It can be a lot to handle. I've had some of my more complicated experiences on LSD, but it's a lovely thing for me. And go figure that the first books I was reading were about LSD.
Yeah, not medical advice, so it's just personal opinion, right? Yeah, from the spiritual or psychedelic minimalism, that's for sure. I remember thinking once in a ceremony. I mean, I after ceremony, I just had this amazing, life-changing breakthrough experience, and I was like, how can I give this experience to everyone in the world, right? And I started calculating, and you have to give ayahuasca to 100,000 people every day for 30 years to sort of give it to everyone. That's just impossible. So I thought about it, like what can be actually used to spread, and yeah, LSD definitely would be a good choice, and then probably mushrooms, because you can, it is in micrograms. Yeah, exactly. Self-replicating, because in micrograms you have the spores, and you just send the spores, and then eventually all those people that take mushrooms and LSD will be curious about ayahuasca when they want to sort of try something new. I've never tried LSD actually. I've only worked with like ancient sort of psychedelics, but LSD has roots in ancient traditions. So
absolutely. And there's actually some interesting legal stuff in Colombia around LSD that you might look into. It's really fascinating. I don't remember offhand, but I remember being really intrigued.
Yeah, well, point me in the right direction would be really interesting. So out of 600 guests that we calculated minimum that you spoke to, and probably even more people in your panels and conferences, etc., you probably collected pretty good sample size of knowledge. And that's a question I like to ask everyone. Based on that information, how do you think psychedelics heal people? Like, what is the model that appeals to you?
Well phrased. There's too many models, right? Like there's so many of them have real validity, right? Like there's the recent Stanford Ibogaine study around like actually healing brain tissue with like better blood perfusion through like the dark spots and MRI images. And then there's the kind of like Robin Carhart Harris kind of like shake the snow globe model and develop better patterns. There's and those are there's probably a lot of truth to those things. And the Gould-Lynn one around like, what is that, critical period reopening, like creating childlike brains to create new patterns, which is a conflicting theory with the snow globe theory. And then there's like, the one I work with the most is kind of the Grof framework. And, Grof's, waning in popularity a little bit lately, but I really think it's very useful because the idea is that each individual human contains a ton of wisdom, including how to heal. And in the same way, this is a Michael Mithofer analogy I'm stealing. He's an early breathwork person, an early MDMA therapist, physician. So when you go into the emergency room for a big wound, it's not the physician that's healing you. The physician's creating the scenario with which you can actually heal yourself. And I think that's a really fundamental and great analogy for psychedelics. And I think like when it gets complicated is when we bring in shamanism and plant spirits to the conversation. We're like, well, it looks like something else or somebody else is healing me in this context. Where that may or may not be true, right? Like we could draw some sort of abstract analogy of, okay, that spirit is now out of you, that entity attachment is now out of you. And now that creates the conditions with which you could heal. So you could theoretically make that argument still. It's just something else is supporting that process. So there's a lot of ways to slice and dice this, but I think that we contain a lot of healing and wisdom in and of ourselves, which is why I think in part that I keep pushing on LSD, because it's like, it's about us. And it's about like those things external to us helping us uncover these things about us and healing us and helping us be better collaborators on Earth, collaborators and like healthy stewards on Earth. Yeah, so that's where I kind of like to land.
It's a good explanation. So you mentioned Stan Grof. Can't mention Stan Grof without the breathwork, right? So he started with LSD and then they shut it down. So he developed the breathwork method. So talk to us about that. You said you did 6 years of breathwork before you had your first psychedelic experience, which I believe was ayahuasca. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we did 6 full years of being immersed in a pretty rigorous community of practice where people would come regularly to check in, see each other, talk to each other. So there's like real community there along with the technique, because it was always at the same place. And I feel so lucky that I found that because I got to see people who were also deeply exploring ayahuasca, but still coming back to holotropic breathwork or doing other psychedelics or other weird healing modalities, and sharing and recentering and being in community and in sharing circles in that way. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. So get this, I sat down for my ayahuasca ceremony, pretty terrified, well, not terrified, like humble, because I know I'm about to get beat up for a while and it's going to be amazing, but I'm, in for a real ride. The person next to me, I'm so happy I'm sitting next to you. It's like, feels really comforting to know that you with a lot of experience is right next to me. I'm like, this is my first time. Sorry. It's like, well, you just seem so calm. Like, well, I've been around the block, just not with this one. Right. And like, I think breathwork is a really, really, really great preparation. I would hope at some point in the future, people have more access to breathwork before they jump in right away to psychedelics. It's a really great preparation tool. It's a really great integration tool, and it's a good tool in its own right for inner work. So breathwork's right in the title, right? Work, it's right there. Like, it's not easy to do breathwork. Like, you're going to have to put in like real effort to get some results. And sometimes you're going to have some duds too. So my first couple experiences were not very robust, but I could tell something was going on below the surface and moving. And I was kind of calling it like a maturation process, like a kind of karmic accelerator, maybe is a good way to put it. And like, there's something going on there, and it was interesting. And, but what I saw in the room, because you actually have time to observe, not only the person you're taking care of in the sitting phase, but like the whole room, like people are going through some really wild experiences, and you're just sitting there going, I got to come back because I want to really have something like that. And so I kept coming back, and eventually I got some really interesting and big experiences. And, I think one that was kind of like, who knows where these things come from. But I've just felt all sorts of like Sanskrit letters on the tips of my fingers. I'm like, oh, okay. And at the same time, I'm studying a lot of Hindu mysticism and religious thought at the time. And I'm like, okay, like there's something here and I want to keep coming back. I don't know what it is or what it means, but this feels meaningful and helpful. So the practice is made up of 5 parts. I'm facilitating this weekend in a very similar technique. Accelerated breathing, evocative music, focused body work, artistic expression, I think safety being the 5th, the group process being the 5th, 6th would be safety. So like being in a group is really important. And I think you probably get that from like the ayahuasca work too, right? If you're doing it alone, it's kind of a very different experience from, being more collaborative energetically and presence with each other. So you start rapid breathing. It's kind of like a big out and exhale, minimal to no stop at the top and bottom of the breath. And then there's the instruction is pretty much breathe till you're surprised. Just keep doing it until you're surprised. And there's not a reason to necessarily stay with the breath for 3 hours straight, because the sessions are like at least roughly 3 hours. My longest was 5, that I was really with it. typically your body just kind of takes control, or the experience takes over, and you're just with it. And again, the idea is that you're creating a safe container where the body feels comfortable enough to slip into this healing mode, where it says, hey, this thing in your subconscious or in your body really needs attention right now, or energy or something. And it's going to come to the foreground in some way. So yeah, I always say the thing with the strongest charge in the subconscious is what comes forward. It's, I need to like work on my language. I haven't facilitated a ton since COVID wrapped. And like, I think we're going to really accelerate how much we do breathwork now here at Psychedelics Today. So I'm going to be evolving my language quite a bit over the next couple of years. And I'm really excited about that. But yeah. And so you come out of the experience, you do some body work. If anything's feeling funky or you want to, very optional. You can always say stop, and we'll stop. And there's an increase in safety with the touch because we're in group together. And then people kind of, before they start saying everything about their experience, we try to get them to keep it inside and try to express it in kind of an artistic way. And then later we'll come together as a group and share about our experiences and process it that way. So yeah, that's roughly speaking the process. And I've been into it for a long time. Since 2003 is when I started, I think. So 23 years.
It is really cool that we can get high on our own supply, so to speak, and just that we are pretty much psychedelic beings. We just need to reconnect with that feeling through natural or external ways. And you're mentioning breath work and also groups. I would arguably say that group is maybe even more important than the ayahuasca itself, like tiny, like few percents, because it just makes such a huge difference. And then people supporting each other, it's really important. And interestingly, as we speak, we have a 22 people group about 50 meters in front of me in the Maloka, doing breath work right now, because we do a little bit of breath work before we do the meditation. Kind of helps people ease into the meditation, and then this helps them ease into the ceremony. And we find that it's better results, as well as different breathing techniques during the ceremony that we teach them so that they can ground themselves. So maybe the last thing about breath work, any favorite, apart from like holotropic breathing, any favorite breathing exercises that you like to use in the ceremony, or breathing to integrate, or breathing for other reasons, not to start tripping?
Personally, I like box breathing quite a bit. I think the data is pretty good on box breathing, just in and out, hold equal periods. So 3, 3, 3, 3 kind of thing. And then I like, personally, a practice I have to calm down beyond box breathing is how long can I take to make an inhalation and exhalation cycle. And sometimes you can get really long, 30 plus seconds and longer, and it's really, really calming. And there's this link between the breath and the body where your body gets signaled to like, hey, it's safe to calm down now. It's safe to downregulate now. So there's what I love about the explosion of breath work is that the science is only going to get better, because there's more funding to research that stuff now, because more people are doing it. And we're going to actually, so like, what can we say about all these different modalities? Like, kind of not much. But with time, we're going to be able to say quite a bit. In the next couple of years, we're going to have so much more data on breath work, generally speaking. But in the session, just long, slow breaths.
Yeah, I agree. I like box breathing myself. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that same answer Kyle said about the favorite breathing. So, on the topic of podcasting, I believe, your podcast is, if not the biggest, one of the top 5, definitely in the psychedelic space. Why podcasting? What do you think is the importance of this specific type of media, like in this day and age?
I'm a big believer in decentralization. I think, as you could kind of tell from my comments and early in the podcast around like empire and control and drug war, like that all comes from centralization of power. And I think podcasting is a radical decenterer of power by giving anybody a voice. Pretty much anybody can have a podcast. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if those like small little Nokia phones that we see in the jungle or in the desert, like if those could podcast too. So like almost anybody has the technical equipment to podcast. And by raising up smaller voices and having more robust, smaller conversations, hopefully towards a productive, helpful end, like I think that's just a net positive for humanity. And what's happened as a result of my podcast is people are using our material in major universities now. So I forget who offhand, but this year I was able to give a talk at Stanford at their D school, their design school, around kind of regenerative futures and psychedelics for creativity. I was able to talk to a school of social workers at UMass Boston. So two American universities had me talk. Like I would love to talk to tons of universities and like talk to kids and get them excited. I talked to our local community college, all because of the podcast. So, building value, building a free library of material for people to learn from over time. Like when I'm thinking about this, I'm like, okay, where did I ask the right questions that somebody might have wanted to ask 20 years in the future? Like I can't have it. There's no way I could really know that, but that's something I'll think about sometimes is like, how can I make sure this is a really good asset for decades or forever, right? Like people are writing books and they're hoping they're around for at least 100 years. I spent all morning reading Plato. So, I appreciate old stuff.
Yeah, I wish it would be great if Plato had a podcast.
We can do that.
That would be really cool. If like all the ancients had podcasts and it's like Seneca interviewing Marcus Aurelius or something like that, that'd be interesting. I mean, of course, I'm a big fan of podcasts as well. That's why I started mine. I remember I was looking for a podcast specifically about ayahuasca because I was just so obsessed about the topic and I just wanted to like ignore everything else. And that's why I sort of started one. But I'm at 100 episodes now. I'm getting close to 100 episodes. Nowhere near 700 episodes. And even now, I would say if someone would to listen to all 100 episodes, they probably know more about ayahuasca and psychedelics and even mental health than like 99% of people, because it is just because I'm interviewing experts, including yourself and like PhDs and writers, and it's just a way of learning, and there's something about the conversational format where it doesn't feel as stressful and the information just like slowly sips in. Like for example, I started this retreat center and I never went to business school. Everything I learned about business was from listening to podcasts. And a lot of stuff that I learned about plant medicine is from listening to podcasts. And it's just like, why is it even, I mean, honestly, in the future, they should just give you a diploma after like listening to 500 episodes on a certain topic.
Do you think I should have a PhD yet?
Yeah, you should definitely have a PhD.
Thank you.
Yeah, PhD in podcasting.
Comparative psychedelics. Yeah, isn't it interesting? Like education being free. It's like the economy of education is changing because of this technology and many other technologies.
Yeah, and the decentralization thanks to podcasts. I'm a big fan of decentralization. I think, when it was like 6-7 years ago, I was like, what's the future holds? Like, what should I be interested in? And I got interested in blockchain, which is, technology behind Bitcoin. And then later on, I got interested in psychedelics because it's sort of has a similar feel to it. So I don't know. I never ask anyone about that, but just because the topic came, are you interested in Bitcoin?
So let's flip the question. Like, should governments control money? Like, what happens when we disconnect money from governments? I think it's a very important thing. I think governments have, especially the United States government, has radically manipulated the world due to government being too close to money and owning money supply. And we're seeing, well, it's very complicated too, right? Like there's kind of like this really interesting kind of Russia-China axis competing with the United States now. And it's like, who do we want to win is kind of the new question. But it looks like the United States dollar is definitely not going to be the dominant thing. And cryptocurrencies will be a dominant player as part of the future. So yes, I think like cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin are very, very interesting and very important. I think they're radically misunderstood. I got into them initially because of what I do for work. But I still think it's a super interesting technology. I've always been a software nerd.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely very interested in all of those topics. So I know you got to run soon. So let's wrap it up. Just maybe any last parting words, and what would you want? Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, our main website, psychedelicstoday.com. We're on Spotify and every podcast platform. Vital Psychedelic Training is our year-long training that'll kick off again in May. We're trying to figure out what it looks like. We're trying to adapt to what people want and what we want to see in the world too there. I also DJ. You should follow me on Instagram and other socials, Jomo137 on most places. And what else? I have a giant art car for Burning Man. It's called Big Crab Car, crab with a K. It's really fun, really funny. If you're out there, take a look for it. What else? Yeah, we've got all sorts of stuff at Psychedelic Education Center, including a digital security course. As digital surveillance grows, our need for privacy and security grows. So really take care of yourself, especially if you're entering and exiting the United States these days. It's not a super pretty scene. So take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones and your collaborators. Make sure you're, being good to each other out there. Act with good intent. Assume people are acting with good intent until you know they're not. And then still keep acting with good intent towards them, Be good to each other. We're all part of the same thing. We're all in this tiny spaceship Earth, hurtling at insane speeds throughout the universe. So, we're all one little tiny team human on the rocket ship Earth. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for this episode, and thank you for all the other work. I'm just so happy that you exist, because anytime I want to learn more about any person in psychedelic space, there's a podcast with you, and then I can get to know them more intimately. So I really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Guys, you've been listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with the host, Sam Believ, and I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.